Hi everyone, I'm very glad to be here with Marty at GAF. Marty's part of our Manufacturers Advisory Panel, which is a group of 68 manufacturers who've worked closely with us on the HPD standard and revisions to it for the version 2. Just mostly what I want to talk about here is a Q&A on our version 2. But obviously I want to start with what is an HPD and where did it come from. So the HPD is a standard for reporting on product contents and associated health hazards. And those hazards, like just to be clear, are listed hazards from various hazard lists associated with the individual product contents. The HPD does not deal with the product as a whole and exposure and other associated issues. So where did it come from? The HPD came from really a set of designers who were realizing that they kept on asking manufacturers for this information around, so what's in your product? We just want to know what's in your product, and found it incredibly difficult and challenging to get that information and to get it in a consistent way. They also realized they were asking for it differently, frustrating the manufacturers just as much. And so what happened was this design community got together and said, let's work on a consistent standard so that our request is consistent and clear. Out of that came the version 1 of the standard. I have started to describe the version 1 as the aspirational standard. You know, this is what the designers wanted. They wanted to know, just tell me everything that's in your product and the associated hazards with it. Just tell me everything. And then the reality that we've been working through with the Manufacturers Advisory Panel on version 2 is getting down to brass tacks of, okay, how do you actually disclose product content in a consistent, coherent fashion? What are the details of that? And there's a whole bunch of things that we've worked through, and that's why this is a Q&A, so anything that people have as questions. We're still in an evolutionary process here. There's a lot of work still to be done with the Manufacturers Advisory Panel and other groups as we continue to evolve the standard and work on sort of the detailed level of guidance for different product sectors. So, you know, GAF has been a great leader in this effort, and yeah, I'm glad to be here. So, questions? So the question is, when is version 2 coming out? Good question. And it's also particularly was, when is the version 2 coming out? Because there's a lot of things that I'm looking forward to, including one of the things we have is a setup for dealing with complex assembly products with multiple materials. And we're calling it the material content inventory. So you can upload into the system product contents associated with different materials within your product, and then that aggregates up. So that's a tool that's available for the users, the creators of the HPDs. The answer to, in terms of timing, right now we're looking at a beta release for the Manufacturers Advisory Panel in Q4, so within the next couple of months. And then the full launch after that beta is complete sometime first quarter 2015. Yeah. So there's a couple of different things, okay. I think. So the question is, I think, relating to how hazards are dealt with on the HPD. Okay. So the HPD has a series of, it works with a series of priority hazard lists, which are authoritative lists from government agencies and other sources that are also lists that are used through the Green Screen List Translator, which is another system in play here. And so what the HPD online system does is when you put in a CAS number, it associates that CAS. There's a product library, there's a library, chemical material library, which associates that CAS number with the hazard profile from any of these authoritative reference lists. And so that's what shows up on the HPD. Again, it's related to the specific individual product content, not the product as a whole at this stage. And really what we're aiming to do here is make sure that we get the content hazard profile right and specific before we can move on to those next layers of information and context.
That's still kind of in development.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you'll see is that Cradle to Cradle, for instance, has a material level assessment of exposures. They're starting to get into some of those other issues. We are looking at that, and there's, yeah. One of the things that I need to also, it'd be great to talk about, is the harmonization work that we're doing. So we've been looking at the complexities in the space, and for, you know, for all the manufacturers, there's all of these different tools and systems, and it's complex to try to figure out, well, which one should I try? How do they relate? You know, which ones are designers going to be worried about? And what we've been doing is working closely with some of those tools that are looking at the same types of information, and how do we ensure that we're working together and that the HPD becomes a platform for manufacturers to put information in that can serve and feed these other systems. So for instance, Cradle to Cradle could take the information on the HPD and feed that into their process.
Or Declare.
So Declare is another one. So that's something that we're working closely with all of these different partners to evolve. Yeah, well, I mean, LEED version 4 does include the HPD in its transparency credit. There are specific requirements on the HPD for the level of disclosure that you need to fill out in order for a product to contribute to that credit. We are still working with LEED on how that translates into the version 2 of the credit, and including talking with them about the specifics of, you know, what does that mean for recycled content? What does that mean for some of these areas that are a little more tricky in terms of how you disclose in the HPD? So again, we're really trying to work closely with product partners. For the version 1, if you have an HPD in the version 1, we do have on our website an FAQ which has a one-page description of here's what you need to have filled out in order for your HPD to contribute to the LEED credit. So, yep. We actually are going to have a more detailed review on security for the manufacturer's advisory panel, which includes the IT personnel who designed that. So we're looking forward to having MAP members bring their security and IT teams for that Q&A. Not being that person, I can't give you that kind of technical detail, but basically the way it's set up is that your in-progress data is totally secure within your account and is firewall protected from your published data. So once your data is published, then it becomes essentially public domain through the HPD. It's a public document. That's the whole point. So that's current, and that's also for version 2. Differences in the version 2 is we have a system for suppliers to also be putting information into the HPD system. They can create a material content inventory for their material and then share that with select manufacturers or with all builder accounts. And as a supplier, what you can do is you can, for instance, enter cast numbers for your material and then mask those so that you can be very clear about what information you are willing to share with your manufacturing customers for them to disclose on the HPD. So you can say specifically, you know, here are the hazards associated with these cast numbers, then mask the cast numbers so that you can't actually see what the contents of that material are, and then also specify whether you're willing to have the manufacturer share your actual name of your product, or if you would like it to be genericized and shown up as undisclosed. So really it allows the supplier to have full control of how their information is displayed on the HPD while allowing the manufacturer to be sure that the data is input properly and that there's a trail of understanding of when that needs to be updated and so forth. Yeah, we are still refining a third-party verification program for the HPDs. We are working to make sure that the system is robust whether or not third-party verification is used. I just want to be clear that we call it third-party verification as opposed to certification because the HPD is really designed to be a disclosure system. It doesn't say anything about value of, if you do this, then it's better or worse. So, for instance, a cradle-to-cradle certification provides that extra step and says, this is a cradle-to-cradle gold, that's why you should accept it. HPD just provides the information, and a verifier just ensures that that information that you've provided is correct. The question was in terms of if a supplier is putting information into a material content inventory and then a manufacturer is using it, how do you know when that information is changed or updated, and is there auto updating, or how is that synced? And I just answered that there is controls for that. For instance, if the MCI if it comes out of date, you are notified as a manufacturer using that MCI and can update accordingly. So the question is about enhanced MSDS. Are you referring to the global harmonization system? Yes. Right now we have on the HPD a content inventory threshold that's per the global harmonization system, SDS, and so that is a way that you can include information relating to that level of disclosure. The HPD actually requests many of the designers who are looking for HPDs are looking for an even greater level of disclosure than is contained on the global harmonization system. So that's one point. The other thing to be aware of is both the MSDS, which is the existing system, and the global harmonization system are really focused on workplace hazards, whereas the scope for the HPD is looking at what are hazards associated with the product as delivered to the site. And so there's a little bit of a difference in terms of what would be expected to be on the HPD. The question was around liability for designers, and there's also a question that manufacturers ask liability for manufacturers. Once you disclose this information about associated health hazards with the product contents, does that present an issue there? And I wish I had gone to the session referred to. I would have loved to. I was stuck at the booth, my own booth, to hear that. But basically what's been going on is the HPD Collaborative has been working in a variety of ways to understand that question, and it is a question. The design community has a large firm roundtable that is specifically digging into that, and on our side with the collaborative, we're also working with a lawyer specifically to review the language on the HPD and to work towards minimizing that possible issue. I assume they talked about the standard of care and how the standard of care may evolve over time to include this kind of information, to where it potentially becomes that you need to be having this information and looking at it, and it sort of changes what the baseline is. And it's just a question right now. I think we're looking into it, and it's such a complex question that manufacturers are taking different approaches. Our CEO, his take on it is, look, if you are transparent and do a good faith effort to show, look, we're working on the composition of our products, here's what we know about it, and we're doing the best we can, that takes a big stride towards a feeling of good faith, which greatly reduces the chance of legal issues. Yeah, so the question is, it seems like the support of the HPD from large architectural firms has been very strong, and I would say yes, it's very strong, partly because the whole process emerged out of their desire to get this information and get it in a consistent way. And so they've been very pleased to see that this initiative is proceeding, and they've been asking the manufacturing community to supply the HPDs, ASAP, really. And one of the things, just to know, we are very much focused on being a collaborative and making sure that this is a collaborative effort. And part of that involves working with the design community to understand just how complex this process is for the manufacturing community to start to get this kind of information through their supply chain. Because right now, this is really a sea shift in how we deal with information, and everybody is used to considering all of this information proprietary, even though much of it is not actually trade secrets. Much of it is information that can be disclosed, but it's still a sea shift to start thinking about it in a different way and to start getting that information through the supply chain. So we've been working with the design community to say, whoa, just a little bit, recognize that we're working on the version 2 and that the manufacturer's advisory panel is working closely with us, and that we are evolving into a standard that is going to be much more robust, and that these manufacturers are working very hard on this, and it may take time for them to get to the level of disclosure that we're seeking. So we need to, talk to the manufacturers. If you're asking, so why don't you have an HPD yet? Talk to them, and that dialogue is really what we're aiming for as well. The push for transparency predated LEED version 4, and the HPD actually evolved out of this designer request, which is a number of large firms focused on green building actively trying to get this information. And so it got put into LEED v4 because of a recognition of the need for this kind of information and how many people were demanding it. Okay, thank you everyone.